Hey everybody, it's Kyle Van Voors with Force of Will Tavern. What's going on, dude? Today, Antyn Vejil, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Now everyone's gonna notice. First thing is that I have I have butchered the graphic that is your name. So you're like plain text with a box covering someone else's name behind it. Our graphics guy, well, yeah, he's busy and I just do things. So he's
Yeah,
gonna kill me for
that'll
this.
work.
But anyway,
I'm
it
sure
looks
it'll
good.
look great.
Yeah, it'll look good, I think. We'll see. We'll get a lot of comments. Anyway, Anton, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good today. Just got home.
Yeah, awesome, cool. Yeah, I'm really glad to get Anton on the show. For those of you who don't know, Anton got second at WGP Houston, and he also got top four at the Arizona States, the ARG over there. And what's funny about Anton, and I don't know very many people, well, no one knows this but me, is when we were first, because Anton's on Team Tavern, when we were first talking to Anton, I was like, well, tell me like why tell me a little bit about yourself and playing. And he goes, yeah, well, I've done this in the game, blah, blah, blah. He starts talking about Houston. He goes, you beat what? Did you beat Quinn and
I beat
Brian?
Quinn in top 8, Brian in top 4.
So he goes, I've already mowed through Tavern because they were both part of Tavern at the time. And I just thought that was super funny. And yeah, I mean, he's a great player, really good deck builder. We're going to talk a lot about deck building in this one. So if that's of interest to you, keep watching. If not, just keep watching anyway. we'll talk about something interesting. So the first thing I actually want to go into here is going to be you were a play tester for AEG. Tell us a little bit about that, what exactly you did there, and maybe just some things you learned.
Well, so I have a really long history playing card games. Like I'm really into them. I've been playing them since I was 8. Been about 19 years of playing cards. So yeah, I'm really familiar with the way that card games work and the mechanics behind them. And I contacted AEG because they were looking for playtesters for some of their games. And so I was able to get a hold of them and playtest for them. I'm in, if somebody actually goes and buys certain expansions of Thunderstone, which is a deck building game, you'll see my name, like, it's in the credits and their, like, special things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I had been in contact with playtesters from other games before, and so I was really familiar with the whole process. And it's interesting. It's really a lot of people don't really know what goes on. Like, a lot of people are really they like to trash on R&D and playtesters, but like they don't really know what the behind the scenes process is. And really, it's fun because you get to play the games, but I mean, it can get really tedious. And like, you have to do like weekly reports, and you have to play a certain amount of time. So I would get my group together, and like we would print out all the cards on paper because they just give you PDF files.
Oh, really?
And then, like sometimes they don't even have art on them; it's just the effects. And so you're just playtesting and trying what works and seeing what's overpowered. And you fill out this whole long report on this was really strong, and this strategy was really strong, and things like that. So
interesting.
They use volunteers. A lot of places do. I knew friends in the Inuyasha card game that they got product for doing it. Not all companies do that. Some is just volunteer, and I mean, it's just cool because like you get to see all the cards and everything before everyone else, so that's always cool.
Now, did you also play the games that you were playtesting?
We played Thunderstone. It's not like a competitive game. I mean, it can be competitive, but like it's not something that they play on a competitive level because it's a deck building game. It's like a 4 or more player game.
Right.
Actual TCGs, I haven't actually been able to play test for any of those other than certain ones that I like designed myself.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think just being a play tester, regardless of what kind of game it is, especially when there's deck building involved, it gives you an interesting perspective on card interactions. And also, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you're probably pretty good at assessing a card just by looking at it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something you have to do if you want to play competitively. Like, you have to be able to assess cards. And I know Robert Boyajin addressed this last week in the sense that it really depends on which card games you're coming from as to how you're going to assess cards.
Yeah.
Especially if you've only played a few. Like, if you've only played played Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, you know, you're going to look at cards really differently in Force of Will than each other. But me, having played, like I said, I've played about well over 50 trading card games.
Jeez.
And, yeah, like, and so I can look at it from, like, so many different angles because I've played so many different games that have so many different kinds of mechanics and interactions that I don't think I look at it from a specific way, you know, so I'm able to really assess the card, I feel, in the best way that it can be, just because I'm not looking at it with a mentality from a specific game.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's really, really beneficial, having that kind of perspective, because we talk a lot, like everyone talks about different cards, right, and trying to like analyze whether they're going to be good in certain situations or even just within certain decks. And sometimes people are way off, sometimes people are right on the money, and it takes something like you really respect the people who are always right on the money, right? Like there's just people out there who get it. And is this something you think develops over a lot of experience with card games, or is it are these people do they just think a little bit like just a different way?
I mean, experience in card games, I would say, definitely helps the more, especially competitive experience. I mean, like if you just play casually for your whole, you know, life, then you might not have the greatest grasp on competitive card interactions and whatnot. But I feel like there's just I feel like if you're familiar with the way that the game works, you should be able to assess the cards pretty accurately. I don't know if it's something that can just be learned instantly, so I would definitely say it does require a certain amount of experience. Like, even if it's just the only card game you're playing, like even if Force of Will is your first card game, I feel like you do have to play the game for some amount of time before you're able to get that. Like, I don't think anyone can just immediately do that.
And do you think that also changes based on the format or whatever sets are legal at the time?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, there are cards that we had, you know, in the first two sets of Force of Will that see zero play anymore because the game just evolves, changes.
Right.
Or the company just doesn't want a certain thing to work anymore.
Right.
Like Enter Effects and Abdul. So.
Yeah, poor guy. No, definitely. I think it's interesting, and one thing that you just brought up that I think is worth touching on is the difference between a competitive player and a casual player. And this, you know, I'll rant a little bit for a minute while you collect your thoughts, but basically what I'm going to be asking is what essentially what's the difference, because we meet a lot of competitive players who they're there to win, right? So they don't care if it's Baja Blast one deck format or if it's 7 different meta decks and they have to, you know, plan accordingly. For them, it's like, I'm in this to win. Then there's the casual players who are in it to have fun. Now there becomes this you know, almost this war, right? Where it's like the casual players don't like one thing because it's stopping the diversity. The competitive players don't like, you know, they like certain things that are a little bit different because it allows them, it takes like random stuff out of the equation or whatever. Like any like variance, anything that minimizes variance is always really attractive to competitive players. Anything that just allows them to outplay their opponent is attractive to competitive players. That's what they're trying to do. Give us some insight on that. What do you think is a difference between competitive players and casual players?
Well, I feel like casual players are typically the ones that just they want their favorite thing to work.
Right.
And I mean, everybody wants that. Like, I wanted that going into Houston. Like I said it in my interview that I did over there. You know, after I won my top 4 match, I saw the thing that was sent to my store owner that was talking about the Faria and Melgus decks, and all it had was Faria and Melgus' art, and I really liked the way that Melgus looked. Like, I thought he looked really cool. So I jokingly said, you know, I told everyone, I was like, I'm going to make that guy work. Like, no matter what, I'm going to make that guy work. But honestly, like, if he sucked, I wouldn't have run him. It just so happened that he happened to be really good. But yeah, if he was bad, I mean, I'm not going to, you know, stand by some moral that oh no, I said this, so, you know, I don't care if I win because I won. I just want to play this. But there are people like that. I mean, there was a guy that beat one of my locals that went with me to Houston that was running Little Red, the first Little Red ruler.
Right.
Like, I mean, yeah, he was at the bottom tables down there, but I'm
Right.
sure that dude was having
a blast.
that dude was having fun, you know.
Right.
And he wasn't even running Regalia. Like, I'm like, your ruler literally dies to Thunder, which you're playing in the fire, like WGP. Like, everyone here is running Baja or something, fire,
crushed,
and Thunder just instantly kills your ruler, and you're not even running Regalia. Like, but the guy didn't care. Like, he just had fun.
That's super funny. Yeah, I think, and you know, there's something to that, right? Like, because some people will argue, like, well, if you get, you know, too big into the competitive scene, you lose the fun that you've like felt that got you in the game. And I don't know. I think the fun comes from a different place, right? Like, I think it just changed his perspective. Like, originally I thought playing this was fun. Now I think winning is fun. You know?
Right. Winning is fun.
Right.
I mean, unless you're like, I don't know anyone who doesn't like to win. I mean, nobody likes to lose. I don't see it. I mean, yeah, you have those games where it's just like you have some amazing match with the other guy and it really didn't matter that you lose. But those are so rare. Like, you still want to win no matter what. And
absolutely.
I feel like winning definitely is still fun, like, for competitive players and casual players. And competitively, like, I have fun playing competitively. That's where I have the most fun. Like, when me and my friends or my locals are like on our game, you know, and everybody's playing really good decks, and then it just comes down to really, you know, your player skill and your choices and your side decks and your tech and whatever. But I think that's when I have the absolute most fun with myself.
Yeah, definitely. And I know a lot of people, and I'm going to group you into this category, really enjoy the, like you're saying, the different deck techs and sideboard, like the building aspect, right? Because that's really, you can go in with the mindset of wanting to win, right? You can do everything right. You can get a night's sleep before, you eat a big breakfast so you don't get hungry, bring power bars, right? Like, that's my thing. And you drink a lot of water. You can do all of this. But at the end of the day, like the preparation beforehand, the testing, it all comes down to, like, what did you end at? What was the deck you decided to bring? What did you miss, right? For example, Brian Liu, even though he got third at Houston, which you're at, he really missed Melgus.
Yeah.
Really, he just brushed the card off completely. It was a super weak matchup, right? Like, he lost to Melgus. Also, I lost to Melgus on the bubble. So he betrayed me in my eyes, like betrayal. So that's the thing. So now it's like, from your perspective here, you know, right now we just had 2 events, right? Let's talk about current. People are looking forward to Nats. Well, most of them are looking even further towards AGPs, right? This is a really, really, like, cool time for everyone because it's starting to shape. Like, we don't have an exact meta yet, but it's starting to shape. So what are some things that you look at when you're like, all right, I have an event in a month. There's not another event for me to look at. What are you looking at as far as what you're going to start to bring as a deck?
I feel like you want to look. I mean, you should still look at minor events to a point, like locals and you know, the ARG events. I feel like that's, even though, you know, that's not necessarily always the best example of what is out there and what is the best. It does give you an idea of what people are at least thinking about running in other events and what people think is good and what does win. So I feel like that's definitely something that you have to acknowledge, even if, you know, you think that your deck is better than everything that's out there. You should still acknowledge that because you need to know that those are going to be your matchups. Well, possibly going to be your matchups going into the big events. Like, it's just like even prior, like when I prepared for Houston, I mean, even though I was mostly, you know, everybody on the U.S. page was just, you know, swearing that every single person at that event was going to be running Baja and nothing else could win. Vlad sucked, Grim sucked, everything sucked.
Right.
But then I ended up playing 2 Bonsai Grims, and I actually got like thrown off in one game because I really didn't have testing against that deck.
Right.
And I did kind of write it off. I mean, I beat it, so I guess it worked out for me.
Right.
But I mean, I did kind of write it off, and this guy was just building cats on his board while my Melgus kept swinging. I'm just like, I don't know how you're planning to beat me. I mean, you can keep blocking with your cats, and then he dropped the bonsai, and I'm like, oh,
well, that's it.
Forgot that was a thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it can happen. I mean, it can happen
Right.
to everyone, and it really just playtesting against everything is your best bet. Like even if that deck's only top 8'd at one event that was minor, small, like I feel like you should still put it in your test gauntlet at least for a little bit, see if it's viable enough for you to worry about, and tech against it, of course.
Right. So now for you, I mean, like right now, I don't know, I'll just name a couple decks. We have the Alice's World Reflect. We have some people are messing around. There's a lot of different Night Reflect builds. There's even Bahamut, right? Bahamut's kind of popping up here and there, and shoot, like just a bunch of wacky decks. So now we look at that, and when you're creating like a, I mean, we talk about like the gauntlet, right? We need to make sure that we have all the decks in there. How many times are you testing each matchup? And are you making, like, let's say you're testing a specific deck, right? Like, this is a deck I think could be powerful and this could work. I'm going to test it against these 3 top decks that I just know are very strong. You're testing against one of them. Do you make changes to your deck based on that one matchup? Or do you wait until you do all of them? And your cat's going crazy.
Yeah, she's just going nuts.
She loves talking about decks.
Yeah, so the question is gauntlet, right? Like, sorry,
right. So do you make changes to the deck that you're working on based on the matchup you're testing, or do you test it all in the way that you want it to look, and then figure out which one's your weakest and then build accordingly? Like, how do you like break it down?
I mean, you definitely have to acknowledge what your strongest like opponent is going to be running, like the strongest deck that you're going to be facing across the table. And in some cases it's the mirror. I mean, if you really feel like you've built the strongest deck, then you need to know how you're going to deal with the mirror. And that's usually always a struggle, because I mean that comes down to so many different things like tech choices and player skill, and that goes back to what we were talking about with the whole, fun competitive things. A lot of the times you are going to play against someone running the same deck as you, and you definitely need to know that matchup. I feel more so than certain other matchups, but it's still really vital for you to know other decks as well. And I mean, yeah, you're definitely going to change your deck as you're playing against certain other decks. I mean, my deck went through so many changes prior to when I had the final list that I had, and I still would have changed it. I said that in my interview on the US site. I mean, I wish I had added Duel of Truth into my Melgus deck, and I don't feel like I made a mistake by maining Crime, because like I explained to some of the other Worlds competitors in Japan, because we were talking about it, and Melgus doesn't flip on turn 2. He just doesn't, unless you discard an extra Levitine. Like, you just don't have that turn 2 flip.
Right.
Whereas Baja does.
Right.
So I felt that Crime, usually if I had that one up before I actually am able to flip, I can deal with their Baja early flips with Crime, whereas I can't. My duel's going to be dead until turn 3.
Right.
And I mean, Melgus does give you the extra stone to instantly go into the duel, which is cool, but I still stand by my choice of Crime, but I should have at least sided duel. And I mean, there are just certain things that you're not going to be ready for until you actually like try everything. So it's definitely against all the decks. You need to know. You need to make changes. Like, you're going to constantly make changes. And I don't feel like you should change it like every single matchup. Like, if you're facing the deck that you feel the best, and then the second deck, you shouldn't like be like, oh, well, this is really good against this one, but not against this one. So let me take this out. And it's constantly change. You should definitely assess what deck is the best and make most of your tech choices for that matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I think once you go through and you find like your worst matchup, right, whether it be the mirror or like Bahamut or something, I think there becomes a point where everyone's like, okay, well, I have what's the worst matchup, and I want to think, all right, well, what am I going to do best to beat it? And there's usually a bunch of options, right? Um, like you were just talking about Duel of Truth and Crime and Punishment, right? Both of them work in very different ways. I mean, they're similar card, but they both interact with what's going on in the board differently. So how do you make that kind of decision? Because you're saying the other world's competitors were saying, "Oh, Duel of Truth would have been a better choice." How do you make the decision? Like, how did you actually be able to decide? Yeah, I think Crime and Punishment's better.
I mean, ultimately for me, it just really came down to playtesting, right. And I had duels. I tried duels even the night before. I mean, I was still, I had them like in my hand. Like, should I put these in?
Right.
And no, I mean, ultimately, I wasn't flipping Melgus quickly enough for the duel to matter for me. It would have in certain matchups, especially. It would have been better for me if I was on the play. Like, if I was on the play, duel was always going to be better for me. Because even if they're flipping on turn 2, like, then I flip on my turn, and then I can duel them.
Right.
Like, so no matter what, duel would have been better for me on the play. But I like to build for consistency, like, all the time. And I'm not saying that other people don't, but I feel like me in particular, I always have to play out of really bad situations.
Right.
And I always just feel like I'm going to lose every die roll. And, like, I look at it from the worst possible scenario, I look at it as if I'm always going to be on the draw and I'm always going to get a bad hand. So what can I do to like minimize the damage to me overall throughout the game if these scenarios come up? And sure enough, like, I did. I lost. Adam made a joke. Tyrone Torres made a joke when we were in Japan, because he was asking me about that meta in Houston and if it was as bad as everyone says. And I really don't think it was. Like, it was very skill intensive, even though a lot of people like to pretend like it wasn't. Right. But I told him, I was like, oh, well, he's like, it was just, like, everyone was just like, oh, it was just die rolls, right? And I'm like, well, I lost 6 of my die rolls in Swiss. I mean, out of 9 rounds, 66% of my die rolls were losses, and I still got second. Like, and he just looks at me and he's like, well, then you must be the best player of all time. Like, that's funny. But no, like, I have that kind of luck. And that mindset. So, I mean, I was able to play out of those situations because that's really how I approach a lot of my deck building. Like, okay, I need to look at this from my worst possible scenario. Right. So in those cases, duel really wouldn't have been better for me. Yeah, that's true. I was always flipping super late compared to their Baja. So I'd rather have the crimes to stop their early hits, make them sack those swords, and at least, give myself a little bit of catch-up time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting too, because you, like, just with testing, right? Like, when you're testing it, you're like, I need to test from the worst case scenario. And what we do when we test is we're always, okay, this is the deck we want to test and see how good it is. What we're going to do is I'm going to be on the draw. And we're testing this deck that I want to see how good it is, and we're testing it on the draw every single time. And we're just going to see. We're going to assess. If on the draw it just gets slaughtered, it might not even be worth testing on the play, Yeah. So that's like how we first approach it. And I remember I read somewhere some article on some other site, because got to keep up with your competition. And I was reading, they were talking about play testing. And they were saying in play testing, never allow takebacks. So, like, when, for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, it's just when you make a wrong move and then you just take it back. And I actually am against that. I think what you should do is take back. So talk to me a little bit here about, like, your testing and what's the idea? Are you making sure people understand, like, whoa, you need to be making the best possible play? Or do you allow the mistakes to roll through and then correct it at the end?
No, mistakes never roll through in my testing or with my friends or anything. I actually have a system when I am, like, hardcore testing where I'll keep dice next to me, and every time I make a player, I kick up the die one number. Oh, wow. So, like, by the end of the game, I'm like, okay, I made this many mistakes, and that needs. So, like, so then the next game I need to make sure that I make less mistakes until it's none, until you're down to 0 or maybe 1, but you want to be at 0. Like you
Yeah.
don't want to, and that's what I do. I will grind games and games and games until I am like consistently making 0 mistakes. I don't feel like I made it player.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really important. I think when you make a mistake and you don't have it acknowledged right then and there, you're not correcting the mindset that you had, right? So there's a reason why you made the play, and whether it be good or not, right? We already know it's bad, and there's a reason why it's bad, and the reason why you made the play was something up here was saying like this is the correct play. So we need to correct that. That's the root of the problem. But everyone wants to just say, hey, you made a misplay. They just want to tell you made a misplay, but we're not correcting the reason why the misplay occurred. Right? Sometimes it's miscalculation. You didn't count. You casted bonsai, and the guy ended up living by 100. These are critical misplays. There's other misplays where you're just like, hey, look, man, like I think you should have dropped Lancelot turn 2 and swung for 6 instead of Egg and Guinevere. There's like even tiny misplays, like based on your opponent's board, like you could have done this and it would have been better. Like all these things should be taken into account, and you need to correct the reason why you did it. There's a reason, we got to find it and you got to correct it. That's why I think it's really important. If you make a mistake, like you call it out then, and you do the correct play, it also helps person because you're playing against someone who's also testing, right? So they need to make sure that they're playing against this deck at its best, and take as much of like the human error out of it as possible. It's not always possible.
Right. To a point, yeah. I feel like you should correct mistakes early on because, of course, you're going to make mistakes when you're first testing out a new deck.
Right.
But I feel like as you move closer and closer to the event, that's when you need to be like, no, you know what,
right.
This is not. I can't allow you to take that back, or I'm not going to be allowed to take that back because if that happens in a major, nobody's going to let you take that back. Like, sorry,
yeah. So there's time and a place for everything.
That happened to me at Worlds. One of the kids I was playing against made like a major misplay, and I mean I felt like a jerk to a point, but like he swung with Lance that was pumped to 1,000, and I had the little angel that can't take damage from red cards, and he targeted it for the 700 damage from Lance, and I said okay, and then we're moving towards the rest of the battle, and he's like, hey, that thing's dead, and I'm like, no, it's not. Sorry, and he's like, I don't suppose you're gonna let me take that back. It's like, we're at Worlds, man. No.
Yeah, WORLDS Worlds. Yeah, that's funny. And what's cool about that story too is it just goes to show you it happens on all levels of the game. Like, it doesn't matter what point.
Doesn't matter if you're one of the best of the best or you're just casually playing at your locals. I mean, you're gonna make mistakes, and some people are gonna let you take them back if it's if it's at a less competitive scene, but when you're playing for keeps, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, especially when everyone's there to win. I mean, that's the most important part. That's why you put so much effort into testing. Like, if you're gonna put hours and hours and hours into testing a deck, you when it comes time and you're in the moment, that's when it's like all these hours I did actually are leading up to something. Because before you're just some guys chilling playing cards, and then when you get into the moment, it's like I almost think it's wrong for you to let someone take back a misplay. If you put in the time and all this work, and then you let a misplay go back, it's like, dude, what did you spend 75 hours, or whatever, 100 hours working towards? I mean, that's just my opinion, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting, and I think because season 2 is coming on, we're about to get into season 2. What's so cool, since it's the second season of the game, we're gonna see a lot more competitive players. Right. I think people are gunning for the top pretty hard, and I'm excited to see kind of who rises above. I know we'll see a lot of Anton because you're going to go to a lot of events. I'm actually excited. Anton's coming down to California, my neck of the woods, and we're to Pasadena, the AGP there. So I'm excited. Have you been to California before?
Yeah, for a friend's wedding and Comic-Con and Anime Expo. So.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you know the ropes. But I'll still, dude, this is the part of this show where I just like to talk to Anton because he's a cool guy. Dude, there's a Mongolian barbecue spot in LA that we're going to have to go. Don't let me forget.
Okay.
because I like Mongolian barbecue, and this place is bomb. It's bomb. That's all you need, man. That's all you need. You need force of will, Mongolian barbecue, like a cat. Throw that in there. Like I'm ready.
Yep.
Like I'm fired up.
They're on the screen. Huh?
Yeah, they are. And you know what? They're having a good time. I'm having a good time. All right, before I let you go here, we're reaching 30 minutes. Nats, just what are you thinking? Like I know you're not going, right? But like what are you thinking about that event? What are you expecting? Is it going to mean a lot? Tell me just what you think about Nats.
I feel like it's probably going to mean a lot. That's definitely what I'm going to be looking at, the results for more closely and more analyzing more critically is the decks that end up topping Nats because I feel like that's going to give us a lot better perspective of what is going to be seeing play at the AGPs, at least until we get the next set. So I'm feeling like something abusing Gwyber is gonna be the decks to beat. The Alice World decks are really strong. The turn 1 Feasting Alice World thing sounds ridiculous. And yeah, the turn 2 Gwyber is just really, really hard to deal with.
Right.
Like everybody before was able to deal with the turn 3 Gwyber because then you call your third stone and drop the Susan. Right. But now it's just so easy and so consistent to drop the turn 2 Gwyber or even double Gwyber on turn 2 with these newer decks and the consistency, of course, that Reflect is giving the decks. That I feel like that's going to be something really prevalent, something that everybody needs to be ready for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, Anton, appreciate it. We're all going to be watching Nats with you. Everyone else, like, comment, subscribe. We'll see a lot more of Anton during season 2, so get excited for that. Buddy, I appreciate you hopping on with me.
All right, thank you.
Sweet.